Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm William Davis, and I'm the Director of Education for Wilson Daniels. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time with Bertrand Verduzier, who is the Marketing Director for Champagne Gosset, of course in Epernay, originally in the village of Ai. And so we are going to be talking about the latest release of the Grand Reserve Rosé Champagne from Champagne Gosset. So he's going to be joining us in just a minute. Be about 20-25 minutes. We're going to ask some questions about the history of Rosé, really get into the production methods, and any interesting new tidbits that are currently happening at the winery in Epernay. So thanks for everybody for joining. If you happen to have any questions, certainly throw those in the chat. I'll be waving back to everyone as they come in. So we will have Bertrand on in just a moment, but no better time than to get us going. I always say breakfast of champions since I'm further to the west coast than I am to the east. So there's Bertrand. Let's see if we can get Bertrand to join us in. There he is. And everything smells good on my side. So, Bertrand, good to see you again. Hello.
Good morning for you.
Good morning for me and good afternoon heading into the evening for you. Hopefully it was a productive work day today.
It was. Thank you, William. It was very much.
Wonderful. So yeah, Shannon says bonjour.
Bonjour, Shannon. Happy New Year.
That it certainly is. So, thanks again for taking the time and spending some time with all of us in the States to talk about the Grand Reserve Rosé and what's been going on at the winery. So, before we really get into it, I don't know if a lot of people actually are familiar with you, unless they've actually been to the winery or have you've seen on your travels in the United States. So give them a brief background of your journey.
Yes, of course, William. Thank you for inviting Gosset to this presentation. Well, I've been working in Champagne for 20 years, with Gosset for nearly 6 years now, in charge of, international developments of the brands. I take care personally and directly of the United States, of course, very important market for us, so I've been traveling, of course, quite intensively with the help of Wilson Daniels, of course, and my last trip was exactly a year ago. It was my last trip overall. I've not been going outside France, which is very unusual for me for 12 months. So, and it's quite, so we learn to share our wines a bit differently, and but hopefully soon we'll be able to reconnect physically with the market and travel again to the US to share our wines. And but who knows when?
That is true, but at least we'll have a glass of champagne or some other decent libation in front of us to, temper the I call it the need and the want to travel and to wanderlust. So
exactly.
So hopefully we'll get you here in maybe the second half of the year if everything goes according to plan.
That would be a nice plan, yes. Maybe summer at the earliest, but yeah, it would be nice to, now we're in February, it would be nice to think that we can do some activities on the second half of the year. You're right. That would be realistic, probably. Who knows?
Well, we always hope. So, you've been in Champagne for quite some time, and are certainly aware and, have an innate awareness of the history of Champagne and specifically Rosé. So if you could walk us through, your view and impression of how Champagne Rosé began and how Gosset, more importantly, is an integral piece of the history of Rosé.
Yes, you're right, and thank you for choosing this wine, which is very important to us. When you hear the family talk about Gosset, they always mention rosé. Sometimes it's the first wine to be mentioned. It has become, you know, like our, I would say, nearly not number one wine, but really the wine we are probably in most cases known for. But before discussing how we specifically approach rosé at Gosset, and we have actually several rosés in the range, so it's quite important for us. It's important to understand that the evolution of the share of rosé in Champagne, and sometimes people don't realize that, is very recent, and the strong place that rosé has gained is very recent. It's it's in the last 30 years, and then in the last 20 years, it's been only accelerating, and it's been mainly accelerating in the last 10 years. So it's still a very recent story compared to the story of Champagne. The beginning of rosé, you know, it's not easy, of course, to tell because we don't have very strong records. But at Gosset, we know that colored wine were made from the early stage because we've been making wine at Gosset. First of all, non-sparkling wine and red wine. And if you want rosé, to start with, it's been attempts to bring a different level of maceration from pinots, which have been available in Champagne for a very, very long time, and as red grapes, of course. And this different type of maceration came to a style that in the 18th century, where really Champagne started to become, you know, more well-known and more exported, there was some very, very, like vin gris, you know, that we used to call œil de perdrix, which is very difficult to translate, right, but a very pale rosé made from, I would say, the first press of the juice. You know that when you press, even though nowadays we press extremely gently the grapes of Pinot Noir because we use them mainly for the juice, which is white. But for the first run of the juice is colored anyway at the beginning for Pinot Noir. And those wines, the pressing was probably a bit harder in those times, and you could have the run of the juice was, you know, quite pale, but it used to make those early style of rosé called œil de perdrix. But it was difficult to, if you want to master. It was difficult to have consistency. And the problem is that if you go too hard on that, you can have, you know, some bitterness and too much tannins. And from the early days, I think Champagne, it has, well, sparkling wine Champagne, it's been very much about, you know, of course, delicate flavors and so on. So the real start of rosé and the real evolution of rosé, which we refer to at Gosset, very much in terms of the way we make it, is the early 19th century, and it's probably, I think, Madame Clicquot that I think had, for the first time, this wonderful idea to apply the idea of blending, which already existed in Champagne, to the rosé, saying, okay, let's use, first of all, not only red grapes, but also white grapes. And also let's use some red wine that we can make separately in order also to achieve a different style and to have probably more precision in the final products. So I think the actual birth date of this type of rosé is 1808. Okay. To give you an idea, so it's 200 years ago. But again, it took time really to for the I would say for the style, and for different houses to really embrace the style of rosé. And I don't want to go into too much numbers, but it was representing 40 years ago. It was only 2% of Champagne made. Now it's
tiny percentage.
Tiny percentage, and now it's a good 10%, which is a big difference. So, and in value, because they're often more prestigious products. It's one bottle on six in champagne. So it's a massive change, and it's a very important product in a champagne selection today.
Just
so
a side
Gosset,
question. Do you
yes.
think that has something to do with climate change and the warming of certain villages and vineyards in both the Vallée de la Marne as well as the Côte de Blanc and the Montagne d'Orance? Or do you think that this is, more a consumer preference that they want to go with rosé rather than, a more conventional or traditional, white wine?
Yes. So it's the climate factor is probably, if we look at the production side of things, is probably one factor that has helped. Because we know that to make a good rosé, we need very nice red grapes of Pinot Noir, and we tend to favor south-facing slopes. So this time and it's not true for white so much, but this time we are looking at maturity for the grapes. So it's quite important in view of the maceration. So yes, it's certainly not the main factor, because I think we are a good example at Gosset and if you try older rosés, I had the opportunity with Odilon, our winemaker, recently to try rosé from the 80s, which is not that long ago, but you can see the style was already there and the quality was already there. But it's certainly a factor that has helped, but it's true for champagne in general. Probably in the last 10 years, we have more maturity, and now the key is very much to control the date of picking the grapes according to every village and according to every parcel. So it's probably a factor, but certainly there is a demand, and probably because the average rosé is better, but there is more demand from the consumer. 10, 15 years ago, the alternative to the Brut non-vintage was the vintage. And if you wanted from your favorite brands, or maybe just for a change, or maybe because you want to go with food, you would go for the vintage, because that was the option that was more natural, different enough from the non-vintage, with probably more, intensity, more boldness, with more edge characters. And then now the number two choice, the other choice, is rosé. So I think there's probably very simply the attraction for, the kind of the color of the wine, of course, which is, it's a nice color to have in a glass, and it's part of probably the ambiance you want to create with your friends. It's probably the fact that with the expansion of champagne market, when some people, champagne lovers, were going for vintage, which is probably more serious, nowadays people are looking for something which is, probably more delicate, more fun, and it's also a very nice wine for food. So it tends to tick, many boxes, and so the demand is certainly something that we need to take into consideration.
You talked about the villages, and it's funny, you talked about the color, and the reference to the Eau de Verduzier, or the Eye of the Partridge, where there's some similarities here in the color just on the Grand Rosé with the villages. And, talking about those villages, whether or not it's, Chouy for some of the Chardonnay, but some of those villages all south facing on the in the Vallée de la Marne. What's the reasoning for those villages to be used for the rosé as opposed to the other wines in the portfolio?
Yes, so here I need to do a little bit of history as well, because of course the style is something that we want to have as consistent as possible. Suzanne Gosset, in the 1950s, when she was the head of Gosset, launched this wine that she wanted to make as her aperitif wine to start with. Aperitif wine within the Gosset style. Gosset is quite structured wines with minerality, with depth. So within this more general style. She wanted to have a wine that would bring a bit more delicacy, a bit softer. And the solution to achieve this style was to add a little bit of red wine. So, that was the starting point. It was not so much to make a rosé, and you can see it's very pale, for the color, to have something visually different. It was for her to enjoy her own aperitif wine. So a white wine with a touch of red. That was, if you want, it's not the best word, but the recipe that she gave, and which is still the one that we follow today. So as a consequence of that, you need to look at which are the best parcels to make the red wine, knowing that it will come in a very small proportion of the final blend. So you need a lot of character from those wines. So you need, again, south-facing slopes, which for us are coming, it's not necessarily coming always from the same place, and of course never in the same proportion. But our favorite places will be the terroir, which is just outside Épernay, of Premier Cru, of Cumières, especially, and sometimes Auvillé, a bit further up the hills. Premier Cru, both of them, south-facing. And also wines sometimes from Bouzy, and Bouzy was the village that brought the idea of rosé to start with, because it's very soft tannins. And Suzanne Gosset originally was born in Bouzy, so I'm sure she knew very well this area, and that helped in making a mind about the style. And also sometimes some Grand Cru, but also from the south of Montagne de Reims. And those Grand Cru, this Grand Cru typically is Ambonnay. And Ambonnay is a wonderful Grand Cru in Champagne, which is very elegant, with very soft tannins, and which is southeast facing. So if you want, there are a few key spots, but there is also enough diversity on a certain year to choose certain villages or not, and to choose certain proportion from those villages. So there is some variations, of course, according to the harvest. But basically, it's this south, hills that we favor for the wines. As a complement, of course, to a blend which is, and it's very important to mention, and probably we need to explain that there are many different ways to make rosé. There is flexibility if you want to make the rosé. Our choice is to have Chardonnay in high proportion in the blend. So it's basically 50 to 55% of Chardonnay. So sometimes Chardonnay dominated blends, with Pinot Noir as a complement, no Pinot Meunier in this case, as white juice, and 5 or 8% only of the red wine from Pinot Noir, from the villages I mentioned before. So if you want, it's those three elements together that are brought together. So it's important to understand that it's not Pinot Noir only to start with, which would be very difficult if we wanted to achieve this style. And then we probably need to go for a very light, or even, very light maceration. So we prefer to go through a normal maceration. We make red wine, basically, on the side, but with the idea that we can bring a lot of character from those wines, knowing that they come in a very small proportion. So it's a lot of work, if you want, separately from the rest, just for small proportion. That's a little bit not the secret, but much the angle we have at Gosset. Knowing that, of course, you can make rosé from only Pinot Noir. You can make rosé from, which is called rosé de saignée, which is, or bleeding rosé, from one area, one cru, and the maceration of this area, which gives a much stronger, bolder, more in your face, more tannic style. And it's not what we want to do. So we are, if you want, in the other extreme. We make the rosé, and in France, we are the only appellation that can make rosé with adding red and white grapes. So we take the opportunity of this specificity and of this very strong idea of blending in champagne to be in the exact other sides of the spectrum and say red wine is only a very small portion. So basically, as per Suzanne Gosset wish, it's more for us a white wine, and I encourage for you to try, smell the wine with your eyes closed. I'm always convinced that you will not necessarily say straight away, oh, this is rosé wine. No, it's another type of champagne which use these tools of red wine, but the idea is not to go against the style of Gosset. Quite at the contrary, it's central in the style of Gosset.
You know, it's funny that you bring up the style of Gosset, because that was kind of my next question. In terms of the concept of malolactic conversion and non-malolactic, you know, with the wines from Gosset, how is this wine made in terms of, you know, the still wine? Is everything non-mallow, or is...
Yes.
So really what we're looking at is, you know, we're looking at a mixture of tension in both the red and white grape varieties because of that non-mallow. Is that for, you know, ageability as well as, you know, this freshness? You know, I always get, you know, a bright, you know, very forward red and, you know, consistent orchard fruit, you know, from the wines from Gosset, whether or not they're rosé or the Blanc de Noir, Blanc de Blanc.
Yes, you know, the Gosset style is no malolactic fermentation, and it's true, of course, for the rosé. It's a way, if you want, for us to be very transparent with the grapes we've been picking, with the character of the grapes, with the character of each single plots that we vinify separately. So that's very important to retain the character with a lot of transparency. The non-malolactic is not to make the wine more acidic. We have plenty of acidity of champagne. It's not subject. It's to retain the character. And I think it brings a lot of, if you want, you said tension in the wine, a lot of depth as well. If you want, you have this kind of a well-rooted, mineral, even salty backgrounds, and you have something which is quite, that has a lot of expansion as well in the wine, which is not tiny. The challenge for us is to always have something very firm, but very thin and very precise, if you want. You said fresh, yes, yeah. Fresh, very pure, something which is not too, you don't find too much tuning on that, which is really straight, firm, but thin. It's not power for power. You don't use them. And I think the key with malolactic, we're talking about red wine, is not to overpower. With the non-malolactic, you can keep this very thin backbone, but it's very firm, and it takes your wine, it brings a lot of freshness in the foreground. It keeps a lot of firmness in the middle palate, and it helps the wine go a long way in the finish. And so I think it really participates in the skeleton of the wine. So it's for us, it's and then I guess you get used to it as well. You get used to this style, and you want this kind of not razor blade, but you want really the wine to go through. You don't want the wine to be impressive to start with and to remain at the front and in the middle and then to fade. No, you want to keep it in a very long aftertaste, and you want the aftertaste to retain this savory character. And retaining the malic acid, because for us it's not doing something, it's skipping something, and it's very natural, I think, to do this way. It's a very, like in the old days, basically, before we knew about what malolactic means, before probably the end of the 19th century. It's no malolactic, of course, and so it's a way to retain this character. For the aging, yes, we realize as well, and we are always happy for, first to keep the wine a relatively long time on the lees, even if the rosé is not the wine where we want to push things too much, because we want to retain a lot of the floral elements, the primary character, and the little red berries. But it's true that in order to develop the complexity of the wine, you need, and to prepare the wine and to bring it in the best possible shape, you need to age long enough. And for the rosé, we are in 2014 at the moment. 4 years in the bottle before disgorgement is a good time. But we expect, you're right, we expect our the consumer to be able to keep our wines in their cellars for a long time. And I think it's very true, and it's typical from our non-vintage range as well. And, I said we had a very old bottle of rosé with Odilon 2 weeks ago from, I think it was from 85, original disgorgements, and they keep very well. And yes, the malic acid helps to keep the wine for a long time. Of course, it's not the only reason. It's very important to have the right balance in the blend for that, and every aspect is important, starting with the cru that we use for the wine. The cru that we use for the rosé around Épernay, the birthplace of Champagne, typically. We talk about Bouzy, of course, Ambonnay, the Pinot Noir areas. Not necessarily Haï in this case, because, Haï, which is our birthplace, is a very strong, a lot of shoulders wine, which we like probably to keep for other cuvées.
Okay.
Delicacy is the word here. So you want softness from the cru you're using. If you take Chouilly, for instance, Chouilly is not, it's a relatively light, it's a Grand Cru of Chardonnay, but it's a relatively light compared to Ménil-sur-Roger. So for a wine like this, it could be interesting. Avize, wonderful Grand Cru as well, is, if you want, strong in structure, but it's not massive. It's not too much in your face, and it's, if you want, it's a nice, in a way, it's a nice complement to Ambonnay. They have this kind of delicacy with them. We'll just come back to that. And remember, delicacy was the word. So, and you know what? It's often a wine that we have for aperitif at Gosset. Not that you need to be just for aperitif, but at least when we make tastings, we like to start with rosé, which means that we start with the wine which is more delicate, and then going up in the range, we go for something which is more firm in structure. This wine is really, for us, a wine that retains a lot of the floral elements on the nose. That's why it's not a typical, red rosé. And that has a lot of delicacy in mouth. That's very important.
It is. It is. I think that elegance comes to the forefront when you're describing this rosé. The fruit set is, extremely bright cherry with a touch of, underripe raspberry. If you think that, before the maceration of, something like Chambord, there's a hint of that Chambord note, but in a very bright, fresh, I wouldn't say, approachable, but, it's like if you went to the bush, the berry bush, and smelled it on the vine.
On the plant itself, yes. I see what you mean. I like when you're talking about brightness, something which is not faded, which is shiny, and it's not too much on the evolved, marmalade side and so on. You can push that with more aging, and of course you add more third aromas with much longer aging. But then you don't necessarily develop, heavy candied fruits. You will develop some, little spices and other characters, which are not necessarily on the red spectrum, if you want. And I think the idea, take this rosé, but it's a rosé, it's not a red wine. So it is champagne. So we want to keep this identity, take this wine for you know, a certain side of the Gosset style, the soft side of the Gosset style. You know, if you go for Grand Reserve, you have probably something which is a little bit more structure. And if you move to the Blanc de Blanc, even though it's just Chardonnay, but in Champagne, Chardonnay has a lot of structure and of course the minerality, and then you gain firmness. Not so much with rosé, a bit less with the rosé. So that's how we see things, if you want.
Yeah, and I think that that is certainly a byproduct, if you would, of the approach to non-malolactic, to have that freshness, you know, to have the fruit, even after a certain amount of aging, that the fruit is paramount. That is what drives this wine.
Yes, and when you say approachable, of course, I mean, I think we're not making wines, we want to make them more, when you try them at least, delicious than technically impressive, if you want. It's not the point. You know, drawing power, you know, of course, we could do something very impressive on the first nose and very much in your face and say, oh, I've never tried something like this. But we want people to enjoy that and to enjoy the first glass, and for the first glass to demand a second glass, because you need to be able to go through the course of the meal with a wine like this, with seafood, with cheese, with many things. It's very flexible in this sense. So approachable means also that there are many areas where you can bring this wine. You know, as I said, we make several rosés at Gosset, and it's a specialité at Gosset to make rosé, certainly for the last 70 years now. And we have other rosés where probably we explore, you know, certain areas more specifically. But with the Grand Rosé, and it's more important in a way, we want to remain into this wine that really is the alternative to the Grand Reserve, for instance, or to a Brut non-vintage in general, and but still be in this refreshing, you know, aperitif style, with all the elements that make it a serious wine anyway. But I guess that's what at Gosset we want to do, is always have a certain sense of, you know,
it is. And the fact, you know, this is in both a 375, so it's in a half bottle, a regular size bottle, as well as magnums. I think we've got a couple of 3 liters as well that are floating around in certain markets. I think that this is, you know, one of those wines that you can, you know, certainly have, you know, by yourself, you know, or you can have it in a slightly larger group. So there's a lot of versatility, not only with the style of the wine, but also with the bottle sizes that are available in the United States.
Yes, and the Magnum, of course, for me, I always tend to promote Magnum, because remember, Magnum it's never 2 bottles. Magnum is another expression of the same cuvée. At Gosset, we always push the aging of the Magnum a bit further, so it can be an additional 6 months. So you gain more texture and you gain more depth. And the Magnum is all different experience in a way. I certainly very much recommend to try Magnums. I mean, instead of 2 bottles, just to see that it's not the same thing. It's another expression of the same wine. The wine you have typically at the moment in the US, I believe, because well, but it's 2014. It's probably, but it's just a personal comment I should probably not make. But at the moment in the range, it's probably my favorite wine, and I'm not. Another thing I should not say, but we are between us. For me, Champagne, at the end of the day, is always a white wine, but with a wine like this, I'm converted into something which is, if you're white wine lovers, you can find your way with a wine like this. But I think it's really one of the wines at the moment in the range that shows the best. Honestly, 14 bays for me is so, you know, we try to continue to improve, of course, if we can, and to bring this level of precision. But you know, also it's not so much the base of the wine, but it's also about the time when you drink it. 2014 is in the market now. We're in 2021. You are in the right balance. It's not a wine that was made yesterday. It's a wine that has some good bottle age. But I can tell you, if you have the opportunity to try it with us now, as you said, William, it's freshness first, and you don't lose that over the years. That's what's important. And that's where the normal lactic, of course, and the Chardonnay as well is very important, because you keep this brightness in the wine for a long time. You don't lose that at all. Yeah.
I couldn't have said it
so
better.
Magnum is a good choice, always.
No, it is. It's absolutely delicious. It's in the right spot. The window of drinking for this wine, at least in the 750 in the regular size bottle, it's highly enjoyable. So
and half bottles actually exist as well on this wine. We make very little half bottles of this wine. We make very little half bottles in general, but they're available, and and sometimes it can be a good option as well. As opposite to Magnum, a little bit younger than the bottle to achieve the right balance. But of course, it works very well. The dosage on this wine is around 8 grams, and so it's a Brut Champagne. Of course, the idea is to bring the softness, some fruitiness, but it's not to bring some sweetness. But for a wine like this, 2014, the disgorgement has taken place not 2 months ago. The disgorgement has been taking place, I think, for this one, bottled in 15. Yes. Mid-19 probably, so you've got additional bottle age after disgorgement. So dosage is very integrated into the wine, which is very important. I'm saying this because having traveled in the US, I know that often people ask about the dosage, but it's very important to remember that the dosage by itself, separated from the fact that it is Chardonnay dominated, it's normal lactic fermentation, and it's been disgorged months ago, that has a very big impact. So don't take a number like 8 grams as, I like my wines when it's 3 grams, everything. No, this is dry.
No, I agree. It's there's to have the dosage in contact with the wine for 2 or 3 years completely changes the perception of sweetness in the finished wine on the palate.
Yes, definitely. Very, very important in our policy. Never last minute disgorgement. No. Time on the lees, of course, very important. Time of the lees at the winery before shipping for 6 months, 1 year often. That's equally important.
Well, that it is. Well, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us, and I know that it's getting into the early evening in Epernay.
It's completely dark in Epernay.
Then it's fully evening. Then it is fully evening. Is there anything that you'd like to tell everyone that's watching? Anything that's going on that's new at the winery, or closing comment?
Yes, many things. Just look behind me. We have those. Well, talking about rosé, we have the Célébris rosé, which is another example of very, very sharp and very thin structure of a rosé, which is 2007. I'm saying this because if you know Célébris, this is a different presentation now, and of course for the white as well. So because they are behind me, I take the opportunity to tell you that Célébris is now coming with a new presentation, which is more recognizable for a wine which is a bit unique in our range. But we have, I must say, always a lot of projects at the winery. We have wines aging in our cellars that will come, that we are trying all the time. I think that the secret at Gosset, we've been releasing 100% Pinot Noir, We are doing some limited edition on different wines. So we are playing with the possibilities that are offered to us within the Gosset range, within the Gosset style. And yes, we have a new wine, which we are very excited about, which is called 12 Years. And the 12 years, as it says, it's very simple but strong statement. It's 12 years on the lease, and it's a small production. It comes with always the antique bottle, but it comes with the blue label. And if you have the opportunity, we've made 12,000 bottles of this wine for the entire world. So, but at Gosset, we like to do that. We like to continue, hopefully, to experiment and try new things and explore and hopefully improve with new technique in the cellars. But so don't worry, we continue to work the wine of Champagne, because for us it's wine first, and then some bubbles, but it's wine first. And no, I want to thank you for your time as well. I hope you like the wine. I hope you can. I hope everybody's safe. I hope everybody's going to be all right. And drink champagne and enjoy as much as you can.
Well, thank you again so much, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take your advice and
santé,
santé,
as we say. Everybody.
Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Look forward to the next IG Live for Wilson Daniels, where in 2 weeks we're going to be speaking a little further south, a little warmer, and that will be Chateau Peyrassol, where we'll be launching the rosés from the Côte de Provence and the Vallée de la Marais. So again, thank you so much, Bertrand.
My pleasure. Thank you, William.
And we will see you soon.
I hope so. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You too, my friend.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks again, guys.